Oh, hello there, and thanks for joining Uncomplicated Math today. Today we're going to be looking at how to divide decimals, and by the end of this video you'll know the steps involved when dividing a decimal by another decimal. So let's get started. So in question number 1, we're being asked to divide the decimal 6 and 42 hundredths by 4 tenths. So looking over to the right hand side here under our steps involved, we can see that our first step is to set up the equation. And in order to do that, first we need to figure out which of these two numbers is our dividend, or which of these two numbers is the one being divided. And in this case, our dividend is 6 and 42 hundredths. So down below, we're going to write the decimal of 6 and 42 hundredths and put the division bar up top. That leaves us with our divisor, which in this case happens to be 4 tenths, and the divisor is the one that's doing the dividing. So we're going to write the divisor to the left and on the outside of our division bar. So now that we've set up the equation, we can move on to step number 2, where we see the question whole number divisor. And the reason that question is there is because we can't actually work through the division process unless our divisor is a whole number. So in order for us to turn this decimal of 4 tenths into a whole number, we're going to multiply our decimal by 10, because that's going to shift our decimal place one place over to the right, which is going to give us the whole number of 4. But we need to do the same thing to our dividend as well. So we're going to multiply our dividend by 10 as well, which is going to shift our decimal place one place over to the right. So we've multiplied both sides now by 10. We're actually going to go ahead and rewrite this problem because it currently would be a little challenging to work through. So we have a new dividend of 64 and 2 tenths, and we have a divisor of 4. And the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to write our decimal place right up top here, because the location of our decimal is not going to change in our answer. So now we can move on to step number 3, which is to work through the division steps from left to right. So first we're going to start out by dividing, and we know that we can make one equal group of 4 out of 6. So up top above the 6, we're going to write a 1, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is to multiply. And when we multiply 1 times 4, we get 4. Next, we're going to move on to the division step of subtract. And when we take away 4 from 6, we get 2. So now we're going to move on to the next step, which is to bring down the number that's immediately to the right of the place that we've just divided, giving us 24 for when we repeat the division steps over, except this time when we start with dividing, we're going to be dividing 24 by 4. And we know that we can make 6 equal groups of 4 out of 24, so we're going to write our 6, and then we're going to multiply 6 times 4, which we know gives us 24. So we're going to write 24 down below and then subtract, leaving us with 0. So now what we need to do is we need to bring down the number that's immediately to the right. So we're going to bring down our 2. And as we can see here, we can't make a group of 4 out of 2. So up top, we're going to write a 0, and we're just going to repeat this division process. And when we multiply 0 times 4, we get 0. And when we take away 0 from 2, we're left with 2. But we're not done here because we can't leave a remainder. Our decimal is the remainder itself. So we need to bring down something else. So we're going to put a 0 to the right of our decimal place because it doesn't change the value of our decimal. 64 and 20 hundredths has the same value as 64 and 2 tenths. So now we actually have a number to bring down. So we're going to bring down our 0 here, giving us 20. So now we're going to repeat the division steps, except this time we're dividing 20 by 4. And we know that we can make 5 equal groups of 4 out of 20. So then we're going to move on to our next division step, which is to multiply. And when we multiply 5 times 4, we get 20. And when we subtract 20 from 20, we're left with 0. So when we divide 6 and 42 hundredths by 4 tenths, we get the quotient of 16 and 5 hundredths. So now we can move on to question number 2, where this time we're being asked to divide 10 and 45 hundredths by 5 hundredths. So first we're going to set up the equation. We know that the 10 and 45 hundredths is our dividend. So we're going to write that down below of 10 and 45 hundredths. And we're going to put our division bar up top, leaving us our divisor of 5 hundredths. So we're going to write the divisor of 5 hundredths to the left and on the outside. And just like we had to do for our first problem, for step number 2, we need to turn our decimal into a whole number. But this time, instead of multiplying it by 10 just once, we need to multiply it by 10 twice because we need to shift the decimal place 2 places over to the right in order to convert this decimal into a whole number. So we're going to multiply by 10 and then by 10 once again. So we have times 10 and times 10. So now we have a whole number of 5, and we need to do the same thing to our dividend as well. So we're going to multiply it by 10 and then once again by 10 to move our decimal place all the way to the outside, giving us a dividend of 1045. So now, just like we did with our first problem, we're going to rewrite this division problem with our new dividend and divisor so that it's a bit easier to solve. So our dividend is 1045 and our divisor is now 5. So now we can work through the division steps from left to right. And we can see here that our first step is to divide, and we can't make a group of 5 out of 1, so we're going to move from left to right. And we know that we can make 2 groups of 5 out of 10, so we're going to write a 2 up top above the 0 to show that we've divided 10 by 5, because if we put the 2 over the 1, it would show that we divided 1 by 5, which we can't do. Now we can move on to the next division step, which is to multiply. When we multiply 2 times 5, we get 10. And when we subtract 10 from 10 for our next division step, we're left with 0. Now we need to bring down the number that's immediately to the right of the place we've just divided, so we're going to bring down our 4. And then we're going to repeat the division process, except we can't make a group of 5 out of 4, so we're just going to write a 0 up top because we can't make a group of 5 out of 4, and then we're going to multiply. And when we multiply 5 times 0, we get 0. And when we subtract 0 from 4, we get 4. We're still left with 4. So now we're going to bring down the number that's immediately to the right, so we're going to drop down our 5 here. So when we repeat this division process, we're going to be dividing 45 by 5. And we know that we can make 9 equal groups of 5 out of 45. So up above, we're going to write our 9, and then we're going to multiply 9 times 5. And we know that 9 times 5 gives us 45, so we're going to write 45 down below. And when we subtract 45 from 45, we're left with 0. So we're done with this division problem. So when we divide 10 and 45 hundredths by 5 hundredths, we get the quotient of 209. So hopefully by now you understand the steps involved when dividing a decimal by another decimal. Help make math less complicated by smashing those like and subscribe buttons. As always, enjoy today's math journey.